This month of May, with all its many wonders and miracles, is a time to be especially grateful for the beauty of the amazing natural world we inhabit, and to honor the Western Abenaki people who have been loving stewards of this very same miraculous land for millennia. We now have the privilege of gathering here as a religious community. As we do so, let us also continue the Abenaki legacy of love and care for our bountiful and beautiful natural environment. So good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see all your bright and shining faces on this dark morning. I think that any sunshine we're going to see today is having to come from within. So thank you for being here. I am Ginny Sassman, worship associate this morning. I use she, her pronouns. And on behalf of the entire worship team, I extend an enthusiastic, loving welcome to all of you here in the sanctuary and watching the live stream from the comfort of your homes. If you are a newcomer, or even if you've been coming for a while, you may wonder, what is this Unitarian Church of Montpelier all about? We are not a church that will tell you what to believe or how to worship. Rather, we are a community that together strives for peace and justice in our own hearts and in the world around us. No matter your religious background and beliefs or lack thereof, you are wholeheartedly welcome here. To show our welcome, if any of you here are joining us for the first or second time, you are welcome to stand or maybe wave a hand, so we might offer you a special welcome. Welcome, we are glad that you are here. After the service, you are invited to fill out our welcome form available at the hospitality table in the vestry, which is right downstairs, during coffee hour, so that we can connect with you more fully. And we hope you can stick around for coffee hour so that we can give you a more personal welcome. So now on this first Sunday, let us share the sunshine from within, if you have it. Maybe you need it and can get it from the person next to you. But let's share this joy of being together by taking a few moments to greet our neighbors in the pews. Yeah, there's a lot of joy flowing back and forth here in this room. So, this service, and most of you present in the sanctuary, are being live streamed on YouTube, and that will also be recorded and available for later viewing. Please know that you can also listen to and watch the service in the fireplace room downstairs if you should wish to leave the sanctuary for any reason. Also, to help nurture everyone's spiritual journey, please know that we have hearing-assisted devices available on the small table at the rear of the sanctuary. If this morning you would like the nurturing support of a listening ear, a member of the UCM Lay Pastoral Care Ministry team will be available in the sanctuary after the service. And this morning, our lay pastoral caregiver is Dawn Evans. Right, there she is. Thank you, Dawn. And now, let's all just take a deep breath. Make sure our cell phones are silenced and enter more deeply into our time of worship with the prelude.
We come together this morning into this sanctuary for hope. People of differing beliefs and backgrounds, ideas and identities, and yet part of one human species, one among a multitude of species of life that creates a cacophony and a harmony of sighs and hoots, peeps and songs, all sharing this planet home. From our multiplicity, a dazzling beauty emerges, alive with color, alive with sound, alive with the textures that make life interesting. And so this morning, let us bring together our distinct voices, our distinct beliefs, our distinct selves into this sacred time in celebration of plurality and with a warm welcome for all of who we are. And let us join our voices in our opening hymn, Oh, the Beauty in a Life, which was written by the founder of the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Philippines, Toribio S. Quimada. This hymn may not be familiar to you, and you are welcome to listen to the choir sing the first verse, and then we will all join our voices in together, starting from the top with the first verse again. It's number 182 in the gray hymnal. Please rise in body or spirit.
Gracious grace to every sea.
I'd like now to welcome grandmother-grandson duo, Lindsay Wade and Sean. Silas O'Neill to light the chalice. And as they light the chalice, I will share the words of Reverend Armand Pedro, who is the church administrator for the UU Church of the Philippines. We light this chalice for us to be reminded that despite our imperfections, we are still blessed in so many different ways. May our hearts and our minds always value the beauty in each one of us, knowing that each of us carries that little spark within. And if we collectively share our little spark, we can create a bigger light to illuminate our bruised and broken world. And now, may we all join together in saying these words of affirmation adapted from L. Griswold Williams. Love is a doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant. Thank you. So our interim director of spiritual exploration, Sally Armstrong, is not yet back from her grand adventure, but never fear, the spiritual exploration team has it covered. So at this time, we would like to invite all children to join their leaders and friends on the green rug in the children's chapel. Classes end about 10 minutes after the hour, and parents may pick up your children at that time. And this Sunday is also a junior coffee hour Sunday in the Children's Chapel right after the service. All children and youth are invited, and parents may enjoy some adult time in regular coffee hour and collect your children by 11:45. So now let us sing our children on their way. We have two announcements this morning. First is an invitation to one and all to come to a budget forum today, right here in the sanctuary after the service. In just a few weeks, we will be asked to vote on UCM's 2024-25 budget during the annual meeting. And wouldn't it be nice to know a little bit about the budget before voting on it? So that's what today's forum is all about. The UCM executive team will be on hand to answer all your questions, and all members and friends of UCM are welcome to attend this forum. Second, the annual spring rummage sale is next weekend, Friday, May 10th from 9 to 6, and Saturday, May 11th, a bag sale from 9 to 1. Please bring your clean, gently used items to the church starting today through Thursday, May 9th. You can place your items on the stage in the vestry, and you can sign up during coffee hour today to help with the sale or email Janet Poten. For additional announcements, please consult the weekly e-news. And if you haven't done so lately, you might not know that there is really a lot of good material in the weekly e-news, complete with photos. It is always one of the highlights of my Friday email inbox. And now I'm pleased to welcome Michelle Braun to the pulpit so that we can all learn more about the May recipient of the UCM Community Pouch, Friends of the Winooski.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me here. This is really cool. I have been in this space many times thanks to my kids' music recitals, usually with Eliza, so we're in a familiar space here. So I'm the executive director of Friends of the Winooski River, and we have been around for over 25 years now, working throughout the Winooski watershed. If you're not familiar with the concept of a watershed, it's all of the land area where, when the rain falls on it, it eventually makes its way to the Winooski River. And the Winooski River starts in Cabot. It also starts in Roxbury. It also starts in Williamstown. It has many tributaries. But it's 1,000 square miles of land contributing to the river. And our role in that 1,000 square mile space is to be a resource and kind of a hub for community stewardship of our natural resources, for individuals and businesses and municipalities to get involved in taking care of the land and the water. As part of that work, many of you have helped before to pick debris from the river or trash from the river and plant trees. I know we had a big Unitarian group at the North Branch Nature Center a few years ago planting trees, which is amazing. We also do kind of large-scale engineering projects to better manage our resources. Like in Hubbard Park, we installed sediment traps to catch the road runoff. And a lot of people just in Montpelier see that as being for the benefit of clean water in the frog pond. But what you may not realize is the frog pond itself is not a pond, as most ponds in Vermont are not. It's a stormwater management basin, really. And so we're trying to catch the sediment before it reaches the frog pond, not for the cleanliness of the frog pond, but for the Winooski, for the north branch of the river, where that water travels underground. A lot of Montpelier streams travel underground and goes to the north branch. I know everyone has a lot of questions about the river because of the thing that happened last summer, which affected us all. And we have been working great guns ever since, especially in our headwaters communities, Cabot, Marshfield, Plainfield, Williamstown, Barrytown, Berry City, all of the land where the water comes together before it reaches Montpelier, to try to find where we need to intervene or where are opportunities to find areas for the river to spread out and slow down before it arrives here. So most of our funding for our work is project-specific, very project-specific, state and federal grants typically. We have almost a third of the population of Vermont in our watershed, but Friends of the Winooski River ourselves, we have last year 150 donors. So that's a very tiny amount of unrestricted funding. So the support from the church is really, really, like helpful sounds like a really too small a word, but we can take the unrestricted funds that you all donate to us and leverage them into hundreds of thousands of dollars in other grants. And without unrestricted funds, we really are limited in our impact because we, need to pay for our office, our insurance, our salaries, that kind of thing. So we really appreciate individuals and groups like your church supporting us. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for your work and your words this morning. So, Friends of the Winooski River is a nonprofit dedicated to the restoration and protection of the Winooski, and it is our church. It is the recipient of the community pouch for the month of May. And, oftentimes we talk about generosity being a spiritual act or an act of love, and I think in this case, it's such a beautiful illustration that our generosity in the offering is about love for each other, for our church, and for our community, and specifically also for the people who are doing the work to keep this whole community a safe place for us all to live and thrive. And you all can make a big difference with your generous offering today. I think probably most of the pouches have been passed along. You can also mail a check to the church or donate online. So thank you all very much for your generosity. And now it's time for the choir offering.
While the choir is getting situated, I'd like to say a few words about what we'll be singing. We're going to be singing a piece called The Ground by a contemporary Norwegian composer named Ola Yelo, which is not spelled anything like that it sounds. He's actually a favorite of Unitarian Universalist congregations, despite the fact that more often than not, his texts are in Latin from sacred Catholic texts. And so he embodies a certain type of pluralism in musical expression. He says that he uses the sacred Latin texts both because Latin is very singable, much more so than German or French or sometimes even English. And in his words also, he enjoys setting sacred texts because it deals with something that is bigger than ourselves, something transcendent and spiritual. But his music is also explicitly humanist, and he also talks about how there's a whole other layer going on in what he writes apart from what is expressed in the Latin Catholic texts. The piece we're singing is adapted from the final movement of what's called his Sunrise Mass, and in this piece he tries to express the journey from a more ethereal mode of being to becoming more and more human, grounded in our human identity. And so that is what this piece is, called The Ground.
In our community of care and belonging, we hold one another with love in times of joy and in times of sorrow. And in that spirit, we share in a ritual of lighting candles of joy and concern twice a month. Today is one of those days. And during the candle lighting time, you might wish to come forward and share a special joy or a milestone with us so that we can celebrate with you. Or you might wish to share a personal concern, a challenge, or a loss that calls for our love, support, and prayers as a spiritual community. In just a moment, I will invite you to come forward to share your name and then to briefly share in one sentence or two the joy or concern that is on your heart before lighting a candle. And you may also come forward and light a candle in silence if you wish. As a reminder, Ginny mentioned earlier, our service is being live streamed. Anything shared here in the room will also be seen and heard by our companions joining over live stream. This portion of this service, however, will be removed before we put this video in our service archive. And if you're joining the worship on the live stream, please feel free to share any joys or concerns in the chat. And let us go deeper together into this time of meditation and prayer. A time for us to be still, be quiet, to still the voices and thoughts of distraction, to allow ourselves to be present here and now with one another. Opening our hearts to whatever life might have to offer us in this moment. And as we hold this space of quiet meditation and prayer together, let all of those prayers and intentions for goodness and beauty, for compassion and peace, wing out and spread out beyond this room, down the street, finding all those seeking compassion and acknowledgement, spreading out and finding all of those seeking justice and truth, spreading out and finding all of those in search of belonging. And as we share in a time of quiet meditation, may we set our hearts on loving kindness for ourselves and for all. And let us join in a time of quiet meditation together. For our reading today, I share with you these words to the song Maglipay Universalist, Be Joyful Universalist by Toribio Quimada. Be joyful Universalists, come celebrate this company. Officials, members, all unite, rejoicing in debate that is free, to teach the Universalist light to strengthen our democracy. Heaven is Universalist for everyone, from rich to poor. We are not chosen from a list to enter through the heavenly door. Lift up your hearts to God's great grace that beckons every race to soar. The rigid Bible worshipers restrict our God to ancient days. The priests, the Pope, the Calvinists are preaching far too narrow ways. Remember, Universalists, the Son, S-U-N, of God has many rays. To teach the hope that is for all, proclaim the universal call. The Reverend Toribio Quimada wasn't looking to become part of a new church when he opened the letter from a member inquiring about having her child baptized. But there it was, an old bit of newspaper used as packaging that included a list of churches in North America. At the time, Reverend Quimada was in his early 30s and was pastoring several congregations of the Iglesia Universal de Cristo across Negros Island in the Philippines. He had joined the church 8 years prior in a major conversion from the Roman Catholic religion of his upbringing to this Protestant Christian denomination. Reverend Quimada asked many questions as a child, growing up on the island of Cebu and being raised in the Catholic Church. He wanted to read the Bible for himself, but this was a privilege reserved only for priests at the time, and so he wasn't allowed. Reverend Quimada's uncle, a minister in the Protestant Iglesia Universal de Cristo, gave him his first Bible, and he devoured the words voraciously. By the time Reverend Quimada discovered the newspaper listing of churches, he had grown the church and was looking for additional resources to educate the children and adults in his congregations. He read down the list of churches on that little bit of newspaper, starting with the letter I, and then moving down to the letter U, but he didn't find the name of Iglesia Universal de Cristo. He did find the Universalist Church of Wisconsin. Reverend Quimada wrote to them, but his letter was returned. He tried again, this time writing to the Universalist Church of Gloucester, Massachusetts. And this time he received a warm letter from their minister, who had forwarded his unexpected correspondence to the Universalist Service Committee. The Service Committee sent religious education and other materials, and this began an ongoing relationship with the Universalist Church of America. More and more, Reverend Quimada began to preach the message of a loving God and universal salvation for all, the core tenets of Universalism, which were quite different from the beliefs of his church at the time. His most frequently preached topics included universal salvation for all humankind, hell is hatred to your neighbors and heaven is love for them, and Jesus, the Son of God or man. A few years later, Reverend Quimada was excommunicated from Iglesia Universal de Cristo because he was deemed to not be teaching and preaching the church's faith. The Universalist Church of America stood ready to assist, and in April of 1955, having filed all the appropriate papers with the Philippine government, the Universalist Church of the Philippines was registered and established. 30 years later, this church would be renamed the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Philippines. Negros Island, where the church was founded, was and still remains a primarily rural island populated by poor farmers. Reverend Quimada got to know many farmers, especially those living near the village of Nagbinlod, where Reverend Quimada had bought some land to build a new house and the headquarters of the Universalist Church. He learned about the farmers' struggle to maintain possession of their land which was often inherited and passed down from one generation to the next. Corporations and wealthy families would often use loopholes to take possession of farmland, leaving most of the poor farmers with little to no recourse for getting their land back. Challenging abuses of power had long been part of the fabric of life of the Philippines, whether it was challenging the abuse of corrupt religious leaders or challenging the abuse of corrupt political leaders. Reverend Quimada continued to preach the controversial message of universal salvation made possible by a loving God and to support poor farmers struggling for the right to live freely and in relationship with the land that they had stewarded for generations. These stances made Reverend Quimada an outlier and a target. In the early morning hours of May 23, 1988, the Quimada home was set on fire. His wife and children fled. However, Reverend Quimada remained in the house. Gunshots were heard. His family later found his body in the rubble and learned that this wasn't an accident. Reverend Quimada had been deemed a threat and was murdered for his justice-making ministry. In January earlier this year, I visited the UU Church of the Philippines congregation in Nataban, which was built downhill from where the original Quimada home and the first congregation of the Universalist Church of the Philippines once stood. I think we're going to have a photo of that in just a moment. That's right. Although my parents are from the Philippines and I still have many family members there, I hadn't known any of this history or these stories until becoming a Unitarian Universalist in my mid-20s. Standing with me in this photo on that hill is Reverend Quimada's grandson, Percy Mark Sienes, who was part of a delegation of the UU Church of the Philippines, who took me on a tour of a few congregations on Negros Island in early January. After the worship service that morning, we walked through the forest and up to this clearing. In the few brief moments I was there, I knew I was standing on holy ground. And this is a photo of the current church building of the UUCP congregation in Nataban. The morning that we worshiped there, some people had walked for hours, literally hours, to attend the service, as they do every Sunday. During the worship service, children led us in song. We sang Spirit of Life, and several people shared their stories of why they are Unitarian Universalists. Afterward, they broke out platters of food to share and eat together. The Universalist Church of the Philippines became the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Philippines in 1985 and became a formal member of the UU Association in 1988. This is the front side of the headquarters of the church in Dumaguete City. Today, Unitarian Universalists in the Philippines continue to exist as a religious minority. The hundreds of members of the UU Church there primarily live and worship on Negros Island, though there is now also one congregation in Metro Manila and one of the most densely populated, poor urban areas of the country. The Philippines has long been shaped by a history of domination by colonial powers. Colonization began with the landing of Ferdinand Magellan in 1521, marking the start of the Christianizing occupation of Spain. The period of colonial rule continued through the Spanish-American War in 1898, which then began the United States' neo-colonial occupation of the islands. The domination of foreign powers continued through the occupation by Japan from 1942 to 1945 until the Philippines finally gained full independence in 1946. Since the occupation of the islands in the 16th century, Filipinos have had a long history of fighting for their freedom. The brief history of Unitarianism in the Philippines has its origins in the struggle for freedom led by the nationalistic resistance movement that engaged in the Philippine-American War. This armed struggle began in February of 1899, almost immediately following the United States takeover of the Philippines, and continued until 1902. Shortly after the Philippine resistance was put down by US forces, Filipino Catholic bishops came together to demand their independence from the Catholic Church and the United States, two powers seen as standing in the way of true independence and freedom for Filipinos. Bishop Gregorio Aglipay and Don Isabelo de los Reyes were leaders within the Philippine Protestant Reformation who called for an independent Philippine church. They were continuing in the tradition of the Filipino priests Jose Burgos, Mariano Gomez, and Jacinto Zamora, who had resisted the abuses of the Spanish friars in the 1860s and 70s. The execution of these priests, in a most ghastly way, is considered the start of the revolutionary independence movement, fueled in large part by the writings of the national hero Jose Rizal, which eventually led to Filipino independence from Spain. In the early years of the founding of the Iglesia Filipina Independiente, or the IFI, Bishop Aglipay developed a relationship with the American Unitarian Association. He and Don Isabelo de los Reyes traveled to Boston to attend the AUA convention in 1931. The Unitarian Convention passed resolutions for Philippine independence. This is while Governor Howard Taft was serving as the governor of the Philippines, right? And they admitted the IFI to the International Association of Liberal Christianity. The president of the AUA at the time, Dr. Louis Cornish, traveled to the Philippines in 1939 and was made honorary president of the IFI. However, Unitarian theology did not appeal to most members of the IFI. And after Bishop Aglipay's death in 1940, the church moved solidly towards more traditionally Trinitarian theology. The IFI continues to thrive today in affiliation with the American Episcopal Church and as a member of the World Council of Churches. I visited one of their congregations in Mandaluyong in Metro Manila. We're about to see a photo of Bishop Aglipay that was on a wall inside the church. And the quotation next to his photo reads, "Inasmuch as the revolution tends to liberate politically the Filipino people from Spain, it is necessary that we also work to overthrow the yoke with which the Spanish clergy pretends to subjugate us, so that we may be worthy successors of the Filipino priests who sacrifice themselves in defense of our unquestionable rights, which were usurped with the greatest impudence by the friars who made themselves lords of our beloved country." The next photo is a picture of the sanctuary there, and you can tell that we visited shortly after Christmas with all the red poinsettias. And we have statues of the Mother Mary and the Santo Niño found inside the church. Santo Niño is the Holy Child. Both figures are ubiquitous in Philippine churches and also in people's homes. I grew up with a Santo Niño in my parents' bedroom. But in this case, Mary is dressed in the colors of the Philippine flag, and the Holy Child is dressed as a guerrilla fighter of the Philippine Revolution. That is no joke. That is what that Holy Child is dressed as. And then there's me standing outside of the church with their current pastor and his wife. Now, while I was familiar with the origins of the UU Church of the Philippines, I hadn't known any of the history of Filipinos being connected to Unitarianism until reading a book written by UU minister Fred Muir and visiting this IFI church with a colleague who lives in Metro Manila. It was a profound and quite indescribable feeling to discover that among my ancestors, not by blood, but by place and religious lineage, are these radical thinkers and leaders, individuals driven by the desire and need to live out their sacred agency and self-determination, especially in the face of oppression and control. And how profound for UUs today, for all of us gathered here, to know that people across the world, including in the Philippines, have been motivated by the longing for religious freedom, the ability to think and believe freely, and have struggled and persevered to gain this freedom, sometimes at great cost. Today, progressive Christians in the Philippines are among those taking a prophetic stance against human rights abuses of the government, many of them risking their lives. And progressive churches, including the UU Church of the Philippines, are among the few religious bodies in the country that ordain women as well as trans people. To maintain a pluralistic society, people must be free to espouse diverse and oftentimes conflicting viewpoints, ideas, and beliefs. Valuing pluralism means opening our arms wide to embrace our multiplicity. Our ability as human beings to live with pluralism is being tested on many fronts. Authoritarianism across the globe and here seeks to squelch all opposition and diversity of voices and identities. Yet true freedom cannot exist when any group seeks domination over another. For me, it was a revelation to experience the pluralism and multiplicity that is found within Unitarian Universalism in those Philippine congregations. Congregations that are spreading the good news of God's all-inclusive and all-embracing love and offering hope amidst people's struggles with poverty, a changing climate, loss and grief, as well as hope in celebration of community, new life, and the beauty of the earth. It is a blessing of our free church tradition to have these co-religionists, these siblings in faith, reminding us that across our differences, the human and holy will to live freely and faithfully echoes across generations, cultures, and communities. And the resounding song of truth and freedom will continue to fill our hearts and point us on our way. So may it be. I invite us to join in our closing hymn, which is number 318 in the gray hymnal, We Would Be One. Please rise in the body or spirit.
As we extinguish our chalice, let us join our voices and hearts in our mission statement. We welcome all as we build a loving community to nurture each person's spiritual journey, serve human need, and protect the earth, our home.
And these words of benediction are shared across the congregations of the UU Church of the Philippines, which I will attempt to read in Bisaya and English. Mopadayon kamig lakaw sa dalan, nang mahayag patinduga kami o Diyos, paliguna ang pagtuo kami, makitakos sa pagpanaw gayod. We will continue to walk on the road that is bright. Let us rise, O God, strengthen the faith first, so we are worthy of the journey. And we conclude our service with the postlude.